Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi, and it is a Thursday. It's my favorite day of the week is Thursday, actually, because once we get to Thursday, I know that the weekend is just about here, and then I just have to kind of work through Friday, which I actually like a bit less, because when I show up for work on Friday, I'm thinking, why didn't I take the day off? So I really would like a 3-day weekend. But such are, my little idiosyncrasies. We've got the next round of winter weather, and we are actually going to be shifting it westward with regards to what's happening as we take a look at the watches and warnings map that is up at the moment. And it's the parts of the Midwest that are going to get into some of this. Let me just bring it up to the top here, and you can see in the pink areas, that's winter storm warnings that are up this evening for overnight and for Friday into Friday night, as we have these winter storm warnings up through much of Montana. Then you've got a slew of advisories that run eastward into South Dakota and northern Nebraska and western Iowa, and then we have this winter storm warning area that's up for parts of central and eastern Iowa, across northern Illinois, southernmost Wisconsin. This includes Chicago, and I believe it may include Milwaukee. Let me just double check on that really fast. But this is going to get be something for Chicago. It does not include Madison. It does include Milwaukee. Madison is in a winter weather advisory, and once you go north, places like Appleton, Sheboygan, all outside the advisory area. And when we move east, we've got Chicago in it, and Detroit is in it as well. But just north of Detroit, you've got a narrow band of winter weather advisories. This is really going to be a narrow swath of heavy snow. I did notice that the Chicago Weather Service is actually forecasting a total of 12 to 18 inches out of this over the next 2 days. This is a bit of a long duration event for them, as the system is going to be hanging around for a while. They may actually still get some snow out of this going into Saturday and into Saturday night with some of the leftovers, the way this is all working out. Let me show you on the radar what's happening, and you can see this stripe of snow running southeastward from Montana down through South Dakota, and we've got some snow now that has moved into northern Illinois, just outside of Chicago. Probably we'll be seeing snow developing there shortly. Oddly enough, Chicago, one of the stats about Chicago that's always stood out to me is that it's known for being a city of wintertime weather, yet its average snowfall is only about, it's 40 inches a year. New York City snowfall is at around upper 20s, so it's more than New York City, obviously, but I would have thought it would have been higher. The other thing is that Chicago went from 1979 until 1997, 18 years without seeing a single storm produce 10 inches or more of snow. That is a formidable statistic for Chicago. You would think that they would have numerous events of 10-inch plus snows over that time frame, but they didn't. And meanwhile, we probably wind up with more of the bigger storms than they do. On the other hand, they probably get more of those 2 to 4, 3 to 5 inch variety storms that seem to evade some areas of the East in certain winters. This certainly has been the case. We've had some small nickel and dime events this winter. The last 2 winters, it's been really more the bigger events that have dominated. But sometimes, those kind of things run in phases. So let's take a look and see what's going to be happening going forward. And we're going to start with the short range. I'll have the GFS on the wider view first, because we've got a few things going on here. First off, starting with tonight. Now, one of the things with regards to what's showing up on the radar Looks like the radar might have, the models may be underdoing it slightly. And there's that snow. You can see how narrow a band it is. There really isn't much of a low. If you look at the isobars, we don't even have a closed low center up in northern Illinois. Basically, you've got a low that's sitting down in Wyoming and kind of a snaking warm front. We remember back a number of weeks ago, we were talking about the 2,500-mile warm front. Well, this is basically a 1,500-mile warm front. The snow just ahead of it and to the north. Now, part of that breaks off and moves east, so that snow moves into northern Indiana, northern Ohio, through southern Michigan and into northwest Pennsylvania and northwest and western New York State, and then it weakens further. The area to the west, Chicago gets that first shot of snow. You see it there. Then there's a second shot that comes in. This is for Friday night into Saturday morning before that pulls out, and then we have a third shot of snow possible here on Sunday, depending on how this wave comes out from the Gulf states. Meanwhile, here in the east, we're setting up for what I think will be a fairly decent rainfall event. On top of the two events we just had, we will have put down in some places maybe 3 or 4 inches of rain this week, which is pretty good. But low pressure eventually does come out of the Gulf states, and this is very similar to the last two systems. The only difference this time around is the fact that there is absolutely no cold air. The high is going out to our east, and we're not seeing a cold air at all in this instance. So that rain winds up getting all the way up, except to maybe far upstate New York, northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire into Maine, stay mostly snow with some ice on the southern end. But it's going to be at frontal boundary, sets up in almost the same spot, and then that low pulls out. You get a shot of drier air, but not overly cold air, and it looks like there might be some leftover energy here with some rain into the east, the mid-Atlantic states, and in the southeast as we go through the early part of next week, and a couple of weak systems that'll play through here. Late next week, a weather front is going to move through with a stronger high with colder air. You know, the GFS wants to have a northern fringe of snow here with some overrunning precip. Also, this might be the system the GFS uses to break the drought stretch in Amarillo, which is, I think, I've lost track, but I think it's 110 or 111 days now consecutive without any rainfall. And then that winds up just getting suppressed and out to the southeast. And then the overall pattern remains, I think, in flux. We're going to look at the upper air tonight because, you know, if you think back to yesterday, we were talking about those teleconnections. Well, watch this. Okay, so if you remember the teleconnections, let me just bring that back to, we're going to use the new GFS. You know, yesterday the teleconnections had the NAO going negative, the North Atlantic Oscillation going negative, the PNA, the Pacific North America Index going positive. Well, we've done a flip in a way. The NAO comes down to neutral, but never really goes negative. It goes down, reaches neutral by February 22nd. The PNA spikes off the wall negative here, and then runs up toward the neutral line. Yesterday, it had it strongly positive from February 15th on. And you see the frustration here with regards to these teleconnections and how they change day to day as the models adjust one way or the other. The EPO through all of this has been pretty constant, and it's been shown to be negative right through the next 2 weeks, and that remains to be the case. So this would argue for transitory shots of cold air that come in and move out. Sustained cold is difficult. And the reason why the models, we're seeing these indices flip the way they are flipping is very simple with the PNA. And that is the fact that the GFS and to a lesser extent the European, they're having trouble with that ridge that's off the Pacific West Coast into the Gulf of Alaska. It is too far west for sustained cold here in the east. It tries to show the ridge building inland of the west, and you can see it here as we get to day 7 here, next Friday. That ridge comes inland along the west coast, but there's another short wave that comes into the Pacific Northwest, and right behind it, the ridge pops back up off the west coast. Tries to come inland, gets crashed. Tries to come inland, gets crashed by short wave after short wave. And the other thing on this run is the fact that, you know, we're dealing with the fact that the NAO may try and go negative. Well, on this particular run, there isn't really much of a sign of that. There was some during the overnight runs, the runs from yesterday, but as far as the GFS is concerned, now we're kind of back in the other direction. The trough wants to be in the west toward the end of the month, and I know people are talking about this split in the vortex in the upper atmosphere. One of the possibilities is that it just basically enhances the pattern that we have, and you know what? The trough could wind up going into the west. That's a real possibility. There are no guarantees here on how this is all going to play out. All we can do is watch this from day to day. Now, I want to show you the European, because the European starts to look somewhat blocky here as we get into day 8. This is next Friday. Flow out of Canada, west-northwest flow. The ridge is off the west coast. You've got which you want to start seeing that ridge push inland. You've got a ridge building up in the Atlantic along 40 near Greenland, and when we get to 216, one of the things that happens is that you start to get heights falling back over in central and western Canada, and it kind of looks like the trough wants to go into the west here. You've got strong blocking high over Greenland building across the top. You've got this ridge in the Gulf of Alaska building northward. It's too far west. It needs to be further east to have, you know, as we said, the sustained cold. It's just not happening. So I think the best we can say with regards to the longer term pattern is the fact that we are in some kind of transition. Models are going to have a difficult time figuring this out. We're going to go from the next number of days on a bit of a roller coaster ride, and I think we're just going to have patience with regards to where this, you know, trying to figure out where this is going to wind up. It's going to make forecasting a whole lot of fun over the next month. I have not come to any conclusions one way or the other. I just kind of let things happen, and you know, I try to get ahead of the curve. Sometimes it's best to step back and let everything play out before you make a conclusion. And right now, I think that's probably the best alternative. Here's the snow. The Weather Service forecast for Chicago going for 12 to 18 is considerably more than what the models are generating for this area. So just to bear that in mind, I'm going to take a look at what the NAM did with this. And the NAM is a bit more robust. It does show, you know, the white would be 10 to 12 inches, and it has Chicago in that area on the NAM, slightly less on the GFS. I didn't really take a good look at the Euro snow maps today, so I can't really comment too much on that. We can look at the Canadian and what's being forecast. You know, I wonder whether that 12 to 18 is pushing it, but I'm going to defer to the forecasters there because they know their area's climate better than I do. The GFS, the models would suggest something maybe more on the order of 8 to 12 for Chicago than a 12 to 18 snowfall, but still a substantial snowfall for them. And for Detroit, for northwestern Ohio, looks like some 4-inch plus amounts. Also setting up for Cleveland, up through northern Ohio. You can see it here kind of skimming the area, the lake shore, the lakefront, and on through western New York. Most of the snow, by the way, is up in upstate New York and northern New England over the next 5 to 7 days. And in fact, even over the 10-day period, you really don't have too much on the southern end. You do have some snows, and this is from that overrunning that we saw back from what the models, what the GFS was showing at around days 8 and 9. So we'll wait to see if that materializes for later next week, next weekend for that particular zone of the U.S. But on the whole, I'll pull the U.S. map up, And there you see the west does pretty well, by the way. A lot of snows in the northern Rockies and up into southwestern Canada. Not a big surprise that we're seeing that. Even some snows, and this is, again, will they break the drought with snow in northern Texas? We'll see. Snows down up also into New Mexico. We're in February here, folks. The clock is going to start ticking soon. It's February 8th. So we've got to see how this pattern evolves. It looks like models are just reacting to a lot of extremes again, so we're going back and forth on what they want to do and what they don't want to do. And frankly, I could use a break, because these storms one after another are just keeping me very, very busy. Okay, let me come back to you guys on the board tonight. I'm going to probably go a little shorter than I usually do, but welcome aboard. Any of you new subscribers here or new watchers on my YouTube video, welcome. Be sure you subscribe, and we will you'll get your notifications too. So when we do these live streams once a day, you will get notified, and you could be here with us. Let's see. Magnet Fishing Adventure TV. Will I be doing a YouTube channel in the summer when the weather becomes boring? I did do that last summer. We spent our time talking about maybe more of the severe weather more than anything else. And of course, then hurricane season revs up. So we do have kind of a daily look at what's going on in the tropics. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, though. There are going to be long stretches in the summertime where the weather is less active and becomes much more scattered in nature than having these widespread events with these storm systems. But there's always something to look at, and I will be here on a daily basis most of the time, unless fishing takes me away from that. Techman30 pointing out that the SOI index is dropping rapidly. Yes, along with several others. There are a number of indices that are pointing to and saying that we should go into a wintry pattern here in the east that's going to sustain itself for a while. But I'm going to tell you right now, and I've said this before and I will say it again, you could have all these indices and all the teleconnections and in the world giving you indications that we're going to go in a certain way. At the end of the day, if the trough is in the wrong place and the ridges are in the wrong place, it doesn't do you any good. And I just wonder whether that's what we're seeing here, that we may just have all of this happening in the stratosphere with the splitting of the polar vortex in the stratosphere and the Madden-Julian oscillation going into phase 8. But if there's nothing, if it doesn't exert its influence somewhere that it extends up into the polar regions, it doesn't do you any good. So I don't have a feel one way or the other where this is going to go. The only thing, as I said, all we could really do is keep watching how these models trend over the next 4 or 5 days. I'm getting, I'm a little bit disturbed over the fact that we're seeing the model's tendency to want to keep that ridge off the west coast, and that is not a good sign. Okay. I also, I've been talking about the fact that, the NAO should be going to negative, but over the last 5 years, and particularly in the last 2 winters, 2 winters for sure. And so every time models gave you even a hint of the NAO going negative, it's hardly ever happened. And it's been since the winter of 2010, 2011, where we've seen any kind of sustained negative North Atlantic oscillation and any kind of sustained blocking for weeks at a time. It just hasn't happened. It hasn't been there. It rears its head every once in a while and then goes right back to being progressive. And you know what? I'm thinking it should go negative, but I got to tell you, if it doesn't do it, would not surprise me, given what we've been dealing with here for the most part. Of course, Seth, it's possible for us to get a snowstorm here in the east, but you're going to have to get everything to set up the right way in order for that to happen, and that's going to involve getting some sustained cold in here. So until we see that that type of pattern developing, you got to kind of take a step back here. We are at February 8th. We were at this point last year that we wound up seeing 2 snowstorms in that next following 5-week period, including one that came almost in the middle of March that buried upstate New York with some record snowfalls. Okay, so sure, and that was both those storms came over on relatively short pattern changes that occurred that lasted only for a week or so. Could we see that along the way between now and mid-March? Of course we can. Do I see it showing up on the models anytime soon? No, I don't. Not on the last couple of runs anyway. But you never know with weather. Just when you think that you've got everything looking, in one direction, you wake up one morning and you find out that the models have made a bit of a radical change in the long range, and then you start to see that radical change play itself out. So you just got to be patient, folks, and if it winds up not happening, then you file it away in the back of your mind as a point of reference going forward with respect to future forecasting that you do, and think back to, well, it was like this is what happened when 2 years ago, a year ago, and this is the outcome that we had, and you try to match those things up. Never a dull moment around here. Tom Veltman, the March one they had some 40-inch plus accumulation amounts in parts of upstate New York. That was something else. And for Long Island, it changed over to rain. That's correct. But just inland of the coast, it was a foot plus. Would I snowmobile in the Adirondacks if given the chance? If somebody would teach me, as I've never been on a snowmobile before. I always would like to try, but yeah, I'd do that. I won't ski because I've always had this idea that I'm not going to pay money to pay good money to fall down. Let's see, the Southern SOIS, that is the Southern Oscillation Index. Just trying to make sure I got everybody's, any questions here. And it seems like I have. So you know what? I think we're going to keep it short today. My mind is getting like jello with the weather over the last few weeks. I really, really could use a vacation. So let us leave it at that. We've got website posts galore on meteorologistjoecioffi.com, so do check those out. And again, for those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. Join us on a regular basis. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and make sure you got the notification set for these daily live streams. Raymond is back. Good to see you. I don't know how long the February thaw will last. My favorite state, Shellyman Studios, 20,000, 20K, New Hampshire. I love the state of New Hampshire. It is a beautiful state, and I have to tell you, by the way, Connecticut, especially once you go north of Route 15, and particularly north of Route 84, is just stunning. I was up near the. I had for the first time. My daughter lives up north of Route 84 in Litchfield County, and I went to the Thomaston Dam back a few months ago. Oh my God, the view was just absolutely spectacular. Just absolutely spectacular. But New Hampshire is paradise. And yeah, taxes are too high in Connecticut. They are also too high in New York. And New Hampshire has no sales tax and no income tax on your earnings, on your job earnings. I think they do tax dividends to some degree and cap gains, but other than that, and no sales tax. But the property taxes are a little high. They're not as high as they are down here in New York, but in southern New York. But to me, I love it. Lake Winnipesaukee, where I go to from time to time. Ah, that is just, it's beyond words. Yes, Mary Atkins, you will get snow up. And if you're in southern Michigan, you're going to wind up with, I would think, at least 6 to 10 out of this. Except when once you go north of Detroit, the amounts are going to cut off pretty sharply. Florida has no income tax, Jason Schaefer, but it has a very onerous sales tax. Their sales tax is on everything, including foodstuffs. So their sales tax is high, but they do not have a state income tax. So that's good. Also, the cigar taxes in Florida and in New Hampshire. I don't think New Hampshire has a very, very low cigar tax. So that's a very important consideration. How many degrees, David Schwartz, are we gaining every day? Well, as we go through February, we're at the point now where I think New York City goes from an average high at the beginning of the month in February of at 39. At the end of the month, it's up at around 44. So it gains about 5 degrees. And then in March, we pick up about 1 degree every 3 days or so. So we start at about 44, 45 at the beginning of March. And by the end of March, the average high temperature in New York is about 56. And yes, I have caught a trout, brown and rainbow. One of them was up at the Salmon River in upstate New York, River 501, and it was a pretty good sized trout. That was about three or so years ago, but picked up a few of the smaller ones in the last year in some of my trout fishing adventures. So we have, yes, and we have bottomed out in terms of the average temperatures. They start to go up as of today and tomorrow. We start going up on the average temperatures across the Northeast. So we've hit the bottom of winter, and it's just upside from here. All right, folks, going to leave it right there. Have a great rest of your evening and a good Friday. We'll be back here tomorrow night with another live stream, and tune in at 9:15 tonight on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, for the the Joe Cioffi Show, or as we call it, the Joe and Joe Show, as we take a look at what the weather is going to be like going forward through the weekend and into the long range. All right, folks, take care.